Hi guys, Elle here. Do you see this? Do you see what is sitting on my table right now? Oh my god. This is really like such a special deck. So what you guys are actually looking at here is Tarocchi dalla Torre of Bologna from the Museum of Tarot. This just came out actually in a very limited edition, but it is a reproduction, sort of restoration of a very old deck from the 17th century that has never been published in modern times. So it's really very special. I think as tarot people, we've fallen into this weird habit of calling sort of every single old deck like a Marseille deck. And I do the same thing too. You know, that's a Marseille style deck, or any deck that even just has like pip cards for the minor arcana, right? We're like, it's Marseille, it's a Marseille style. But the history of tarot is so much more nuanced than that. This deck is really so interesting because it's an Italian tarot in this traditional Bolognese structure. Don't mind my Italian pronunciation, guys, so sorry. So if you know anything about, you know, tarots that come from Bologna, or they're often called like the Tarocchini Bolognese or something, and Tarocchini because they tend to be a shortened tarot deck. What you will not find in most of these decks that come from this same time period and the same area and this style of tarot is that they are lacking or missing the cards 2 through 5 in the minor arcana for each suit. So it really becomes a 62 card deck instead of a 78 card deck. It's what you find in this guy also. It's another popular Bolognese style deck. It's the Metelli. It's that see, Tarocchini, but it's the Giuseppe Maria Metelli, or the GM Metelli Tarot. This is the one by Del Negro. I might show you guys a few card comparisons between this deck and this one because it's so fascinating to look at. But actually Il Menegello makes a version of this deck also. I think it's just called the Tarocchini Bolognese or something like that. But theirs is a black and white version. This colored version is beautiful. But that's just another example of what this deck really is. Now, the other thing that just made this so friggin' cool when they made this was they decided to not just make it the 62 card deck. They gave you the option to have it like a complete standard, what we consider standard, 78 card tarot deck. So they threw in the 2s through the 5s, recreated them, matched them up perfectly to the rest of the suits, to the rest of the minor arcana cards, and it's like seamless. So you have the choice. I, given the option, would prefer to work with my standard 78 cards, so I can now use this historic Bolognese tarot the way I want to read tarot, you know? So it's cool on so many levels. So if you don't know too much about the history of this deck, I didn't really know much about this deck before they published this guy, but I'll put some links down below so you guys can read up on it. It's actually one of those decks that has survived really, really well. It's like almost completely intact. Remember, this is a Bolognese tarot, so there would have originally only been 62 cards. There's only 6 that haven't survived. They are at the National Library in Paris, I think. There's this great little sort of sheet, I guess you could call it, that comes with your deck that gives you a great little history of the cards and everything. The back is in, what is that, Italian? One side's Italian, the other side's English, and it's actually signed and numbered by the curator. What's her name? Morena Poltronieri. Poltronieri. Oh, I butchered it, but it's signed by her, so that's really cool. And in here it actually lists the cards that have been lost to time, the 6, 7, 8, and 9 of swords, and then only just the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Coins. That's it. That's all they had to create to complete this deck. But of course they added in the 2 through the 5s for each suit. So we'll talk more about some of the interesting peculiarities that you'll see on these cards and some of the things they have in common with other old historic tarot decks and things like that as we go through the deck. And also I did order mine through Arnell Ando's website, and it came with some cool shit. I got a little magnet. I got all these cool postcards with some of the other projects that they're working on, mostly at the Museum of Tarot. And I got a lovely little note written by Arnell Ando. She says here, thanks for your support of this special deck, and I hope that you connect with it, and that she's also included a few cards from other cool projects that they're working on. And happy holidays and best wishes. So cool. Look at some of these beautiful other decks. Isn't that cool? And then this isn't even like the deluxe edition, guys. I got the standard one. I think it was about $75, somewhere around there. So this is definitely more than I usually spend on tarot decks, but this was so special. It's a Christmas present to myself. It's this beautiful wood box, and the lid comes up like this, even like a wax seal on it, and then this card is on there, that title card with the wax seal with like gold in there. Can you see that? But it slides up and it slides off completely, and the deck actually came in here on that bed of whatever you call it, paper stuff. Isn't that amazing? So cool. So I'm not actually keeping my deck in the box at the moment, though. I gave it a nice little home in a baggie. And you can see it's a meaty deck. The back has that great painted and aged thing. The sides are pretty bright white, but so are the fronts of the cards. So I don't think I'd edge it or anything. You guys get a sneak peek. That's a fool. And they're textured. They're very textured. They're fairly thick, but they bend. It's not like they're crazy too thick to shuffle or anything. And they don't have rounded corners. They have that squared off thing that you find with, what's the other one? With all the Il Meneghello decks. In fact, the cardstock feels very similar to Il Meneghello cardstock, kind of. Originally, the cards were much smaller, 4 inches by about 2 inches. They have blown them up for this edition. They have blown them up to about 2.7 by 5.9 inches. And if you're anything like me, just saying the size of the cards means absolutely nothing unless you compare it to something else. So there is a standard Rider-Waite-Smith Centennial Edition card. They are just a hair wider, and oh my god, like, I don't know, an inch and a half at least taller. They're much longer. See that? Alright guys, let's do it. Here you can see the card backs, and on the little information sheet that comes with it, there's a little blurb sort of about how this image here is probably a reference to the myth of Apollo and Daphne, who were both struck by the arrows of Eros. You see 2 little angels there, and one is pointing at a heart that's sort of hanging from a tree like a fruit. Oh, they're so big, I gotta hold them back really far. This is the numbering that you'll see on the major arcana, by the way, was apparently added later. They do exist on the cards, but they were not added like originally. And the other thing you'll notice here is that none of the major arcana have titles, either in Italian or any other language. Like, there's just no titles on them, but that's also a classic attribute that you'll find in these tarots of Bologna. Here is your Magician, who actually is the only card to not have a number on it. As far as I can tell, I don't see a number 1 on there anywhere. So one of the things that I love, especially about just Italian tarot in general, is, you get to break out of that classic Marseille look, that wood blocky kind of style and look with blocky colorings and all that. And while they are absolutely beautiful, these kind of tarots are such a breath of fresh air almost. The coloring can be quite different. The scenes can be a little bit different. I know that this one definitely, or this deck really, reminds me a lot of some of the Minchiati decks. Some things look like Visconti, some things look like that Batelli and these other Bolognese style decks. One of the other cool things about this particular deck is that you still have a High Priestess, you still have an Empress, you still have an Emperor, and you even have a Pope. if you're familiar with the Bolognese pattern of tarot, right? This is the deck that you'll find much later, but I think it starts around like 1725 or something like that, where you'll find the four Moors, or like the four popes or the four emperors or something, replacing, kind of like you see in your Minchiati decks, replacing all the cards from the 2 through the 5. And sometimes you can see this evolution in the history of that style of tarot, where it starts out with just the high priestess or the popess and the pope have been changed, and eventually becomes like all four cards, all these civil and religious leaders that the church, I guess, had a problem seeing in tarot cards, were eventually turned over into these four Moorish kings. But this you don't find that here, even though it is a Tarocchini Bolognese style deck. Is that insulting when I do my Italian accent? Good God. But, and I mean, just like, that's one of the reasons I love the Minchiati. It reminds me of that here too. The coloring is so vibrant, so different. Look at some of these details, the keys and things. A lot of the imagery on these major arcana cards really harkens back to other really old tarot decks and things that you don't see in a lot of later Marseille decks. The fact that she's holding keys, and you'll see on the Pope's hands. Here, let me get there. Here's your Emperor. Here on your Pope's hands, who actually looks very feminine, doesn't he? But you have the stigmata on his hands, the certain type of crown, and a different kind of, a cross wand staff he's holding. This looks very like the Minchiati. There's your Lover's card. And what they did here too, guys, is they, I'm not going to try and pronounce the two people's names. I already butchered them. But what Morena and Ernesto Fazioli is the other gentleman who worked on this deck with her. What they did was they worked on these cards digitally and cleaned things up a little bit, enhanced some of the color, that kind of stuff. So it's not like a full restoration. They left things spilling out of the lines a little bit, so it feels like it's supposed to, without just releasing it with all the smudges and things that shouldn't necessarily be there, which I think is just a great combination of things. I love it. Number 8 is Justice, even though these cards are completely untitled. Check that out. That's your Hermit, or your Old Man Time, and he's on crutches and he is winged. I actually have plans to sort of make another series on my channel that I will add a video onto, like maybe once a month, Wheel of Fortune. But I really want to do kind of a video for each major arcana card showing the evolution of that image, like where it started and all the different decks over the years in between, and the way that the image has evolved, because this is strength, right? And you'll see in a lot of old decks there is no lion like this. You just have this what do you call it, like a pillar over here. Isn't that great? And this one does too. This one has a hanged man, a very classic hanged man. In the Metelli deck, you get a traitor, which is very cool. And a lot of these cards, like here's your death card. This one really reminds me of the images from the Rothschild sheet. If you guys have ever seen that, they're not colored or anything, but they're sheets of cards that are really old. And a lot of the images in the major arcana here really look like that. It's so fascinating. But that's the kind of things that I would love to look at for each card individually. This one's sort of an odd card in here. The Devil looks like the Devil you see in a lot of old Marseille decks, which seems a bit out of place with the rest of these cards here. It's fascinating. You got that old chicken-footed Devil. He doesn't have the face in his belly or anything, but he's got the bat wings and all the different elements in his trident. Looks like the Vivi Devil. Oh, there's another one that looks very Rothschild to me. You can see cards like this too, like the Tower and a lot of these other cards, reflected also in the other Italian tarots. I think they're from Ferrara, like the d'Este deck and the Charles VI deck. Very, very similar looking images. Tarot history is so friggin' fascinating. But here's your star card. How cool is that? And your moon card. Very Rothschild. There's your sun with a woman on it. How beautiful is that? Some of the markings in the background, those are all original. They're so fascinating. They just really, the colors and the way they cleaned it up make these images jump off of the cards. Like, I feel so inspired and humbled, like, just holding this amazing piece of history. Look at that world card. Let me zoom in on this guy. What? So, into the minor arcana. So, this is an original card, the ace. And the 2 through the 5 are not originally part of this deck, but they were added, and I'm going to keep them in. They are beautiful. Wait till you see how exactly precisely they look compared to the other ones. So they added that, they added that, they added the 5, and then you see one of the originals. This is the 6 of Wands. They blend seamlessly. How clean they are too. 9 and 10, and that's your suit of wands. And into your court cards. Sometimes this peach pink color, I don't think the camera's doing it justice. It jumps off of the card. It is so beautiful. One of the other cool things about this deck too, I forgot to mention it, is the pages in the male suits of the wands and the swords have male pages. However, for the more feminine suits, right, the coins and the cups, you have like female chambermaids instead of male pages. How cool! Love. That's why I want to get my hands on the Cariel Visconti, because in that deck you actually have a male and a female knight and a male and a female page for each suit. So cool. But here's your knight, always on horseback. Here is your Queen of Wands. There are 2 of the queens from this deck, or some of the cards that were lost, but this is one of the original queens. It's actually the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Coins that they had to completely redo, or just do, because they've been lost to time. And there's your King of Wands. Here is your Ace of Cups. That detail, like this all just reminds me so much of my beloved Minchiati decks. I can't, they're so good. And then look, they created the 2 through the 5 again. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Pretty gorgeous. And then blends right seamlessly into what is original to this deck. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Look at the 10 of Cups. Isn't that beautiful? Up, and then here is our female chambermaid or female page of Cups. Here is your Knight of Cups. That pinky peach color, it's so gorgeous. Doesn't it, the coloring, just like, it feels so ancient Italian. Your Queen and your King of Cups. Oh, sorry, wait, go back. This was one that they added in. Look, you can't even tell. They really did a great job. If anything was gonna sort of jump out in this deck as not being originally part of it, it would be the 2 court cards that they had to create for it, the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Coins. And yeah, the expression on her face is lovely, and it really, it fits. It looks like they're set, the Queen and the King. That looks exactly like some Minchiati cards you guys may have seen. As your Ace of Coins. Isn't that gorgeous? 2 of Coins added, 3 of Coins added, 4 of Coins, and 5. And then right into the 6. Can't even tell the difference. Amazing. 9, and 10. And this was originally on there also. Carte fine dalla Torre in Bologna. Bologna? Bologna. And then here is our other glorious female page. Woot woot. With her hot pink chest. I love the pink though. It is so pretty. And there is your Knight of Coins. Isn't he exquisite? This deck is just blowing my mind, guys. There is your Queen of Coins. And this is the other big card that needed to be created for this deck because it was lost. And she fits in perfectly. Apparently for those two court cards that they had to create, they didn't have to create any of the majors. They're all still in existence. They've all survived. But apparently for those two court cards, they did rely heavily on like some 18th century Bolognese style decks to create those two. There is your Ace of Swords. And then really, I think if I'm correct, the only surviving card in the entire suit of swords, except for the court cards, is the 10 of Swords. So I guess they worked off that for all of these. Well, the Ace also, but it looks so different, you know? But they're beautiful, and I pretty much love how they did things here. I know I've talked about this, and when I talked about marking Marseille cards and things, you know, depending on how you choose to read this, you know, there's still the tips, the points of the sword are still at the top, but they have the central sword pointing down in, I think, a couple of the cards, which is a little bit weird for me, but you can clearly see the points of the swords and the hilts at the bottom, see? So it still has a pretty clear upright and reversal thing going on. Here's your 4 of Swords and your 5 of Swords. See all the hilts at the bottom, all the points at the top. Except for the central pointing down. So really, it's not going to give me any problems. 7, 8 of Swords, 9 of Swords, and here's your surviving 10 of Swords. Right? Gorge. Here is your Page of Swords, male, in the male suit of swords. Look at that knight. Colors, my God, you guys. And then there is your Queen of Swords. She's an original surviving card. So you can see when you look at the other queens, like they fit right in so well. And then there is your King of Swords. There's something very emotional going on with his face. A little solemn. And back to our joyful drumming, flute playing fool. And real quick, you know, I didn't actually do any card comparisons in this video, but this is that Giamatelli Tarocchini Bolognese deck that I was talking about. And you can see here it has that awesome, there's a lot of similarities between the images on these cards too, but it's in the same vein, in the same fashion. So the cards are not numbered here, but they're also not named. This is all the major cards. And you can see, actually, it is just a 62 card deck, which you could very easily turn that into also. This one's like fancy as shit, this deck, the way it's all designed. Look at that fool, like right out of the Minchiati. But it's done, you know, the same way. Here you have your ace, and then it jumps right into the 6. This is the suit of coins, obviously. 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you have your 4 courts still. Your page, who actually looks very feminine in this deck, although I think she's supposed to be a dude. But your page, your knight, your queen, and your king, and it follows suit in the other suits. I'll show you guys this deck at some point soon, I promise, because it's cool. And you can see they are a little bit on the long side for me to try and shuffle long ways because they're so long. So this is the kind of deck that we're gonna do a sideways shuffle like that. Very easy. They actually shuffle very, very easily like that. They're not too thick to do this kind of a shuffle with. Not at all. Oh, messed that one up. But I can't quite get my hands around both sides to do it like this, can I? Yeah, no, I can't quite reach. But yeah, that is the Tarocchi fino dalla Torre, and I was so excited to show you guys this fascinating piece of tarot history. Oh, you can go back in your little box now. Say bye. Don't you love when decks come in a friggin' wooden box? Amazing. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you real soon. Mwah. Bye.